Well, colleagues, it's time for questions to our panel. And I would also encourage panelists to ask or comment on each other if you would like to. There were significant nuances along this table that you might like to discuss. But I'd like to first turn to the audience, ask you to take notes. We don't want to do one-on-one answers. Do a round for about the next 10 minutes, and then you will have 5 minutes, literally a 1 minute moment to react or respond before we close. So, Shengeng, I've seen your hand up. Microphones are moved around.
Yeah, just a very short question to everybody. I don't discriminate against anybody. Have you thought about increasing fertilizer production in Africa? I mean, on the one hand, Africa is exporting oil to other countries. In the meantime, import fertilizers. So it might be a possibility to set up some sort of fertilizer plants in Lagos, some of the big ports. So then you will reduce the transportation costs dramatically.
Okay. Let's be more specific on that one. Great plans have been made, didn't materialize. The fertilizer factory in Ethiopia. Balu, you note this down. Angola has plans. Why doesn't it work out? It's not that people haven't thought about Shengeng's question. I take two more here, then we come to you. Hands up, otherwise you don't get a mic. Please, have we only one mic? You give it right here to Regina, and you hand your mic right away there in the middle, please, so that we are faster.
Yeah, Regina Birner from IFPRI. That was really fascinating. A question to the colleagues from the World Bank. I would actually agree with Derek's point that the political capture will always be a problem, no matter how you do the subsidies. And therefore, I'm wondering whether from the bank side you actually have some analysis on under which conditions is it actually easier or more difficult to meet these political economy challenges. Because my hypothesis would be that countries for which it really matters politically, whether they are food secure or food insecure, they have much more incentives to get an actually outcome from these subsidies. So I'm not surprised that it works better than Ethiopia than it works in Ghana, where the political gain is really just distribute the voucher and not the ultimate outcome. And a related question, in those countries where it is politically very difficult because there's no political incentive in the outcome, wouldn't it be smarter to look at other factors, which I haven't heard too much in the presentations, which look at the demand side for fertilizer? We just finished a study in northern Ghana where we showed through economic modeling of households that if households have access to irrigation and to credit, so removing the risk constraint and the liquidity constraint, a linear programming model would predict that demand increases by factor 4. Maybe that's a smarter strategy for those countries.
Thank you. Next, please.
Yes. Is this working?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah. My name is Joe Dubry. I'm with the Agricultural and Trade Directorate at the OECD, therefore institutionally obliged to be skeptical. My question refers to the points that Nick was making. It's quite a general question. The excuse for subsidies has to do with market failures, and Nick listed three categories of market failures: information, liquidity, and risk. And then he raised some questions about whether risk could be justified as a criterion for public policy action, and I share that ambiguity. But what about the other two? Liquidity. Do we not have first best solutions to liquidity problems? I was at a great World Bank conference a couple of weeks ago on social protection systems, and I learned a lot about conditional cash transfer programs. It seemed to me that would be potentially a solution to a liquidity problem. And haven't we, over many years of experience with innovation and technology transfer systems, learned something about solving information problems? And I just wonder why it is that we have opted for subsidies and subsidies that seem now to run the risk of huge expenditures of public money. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next is right here. Let me interject one piece of question. Derek, you pointed at more recent research which seems to accumulate that the general idea that fertilizer use in Africa is too low everywhere has less and less substance. We knew it didn't pay off to put fertilizer into the Sahara, but south of the Sahel, everyone agreed more is better. You may know that work in Uganda, which IFPRI has done. You referred to work in Kenya. If there are folks in the audience who would like to add evidence to the very questioning of the need for more fertilizer from an economic productivity and efficiency perspective, then please speak up, because I think the agroecological mapping combined with infrastructure, transport cost, and return studies points to more and more white spots where fertilizer does simply not pay off. But I think it's an open issue. And these white spots get bigger and bigger on the map of Africa, which I've seen. The audience may have additional wisdom to what the panel has here, but please go ahead.
I'm Thomas Gunn, I'm intern from Ethiopia, and my question is, it's good to have subsidies and increased productivity, but my question is, where could be the source from? If you look at the case of Ethiopia, where 85% of the population is farming, and the government is trying to even subsidize nowadays oil, and it's finding it very difficult. So how could the governments who are running out of budgets, foreign currencies, can afford to subsidize all this amount of population? And if they can get the source for the time being, how sustainable that could be, given the abrupt relationship between donors and donor-taking countries? Could it be sustainable for the future, if it is possible to get for the time being, based on current argument?
Okay, very good. Nick, that's probably something that you would like to pick up. Ladies in the front seat, please.
My name is Lena Herron with USAID. I'm interested in this issue of exit strategies. A couple of you mentioned it, but didn't talk too much about it. We're about to embark on a research kind of piloting effort in conjunction with IFDC that's designing up the voucher program in Mozambique that's going to be put in place for this year. And we're looking at trying to set something in place that as fertilizer subsidies ramp down, that people are exposed to and ramp up their use of commitment savings accounts to start to self-finance for fertilizer use. It's just one idea we're going to be testing out and putting in place an impact evaluation to really look at whether and what actually the impact of sustained fertilizer use, with or without the finance, with or without the subsidy, and in a control area. So we're doing that kind of research, but I'm curious whether any of you have other ideas about the exit strategy. Like what is that actually that we're going to try to get governments to embrace?
Thank you. I thought you also had the hand up.
My name is Jean Downing. I'm from USAID as well, and Lena and I just came back from Malawi. And the work that I do is looking at value chains and market systems. And I really wanted to speak to your comments about if developed countries can use subsidies, why shouldn't developing countries use subsidies? And one thing I think about in terms of subsidies is that it is a small part of a large system. A system that includes smallholders and how they make decisions, households and how they make decisions, their ability to access markets. And looking at fertilizer is really one input to a value chain that is actually another product or several products that they have to be able to get to market profitably. And so in looking at fertilizer, it seems to me we're really looking at a very small part of a market system. And how do we ensure that this subsidy just for fertilizer is going to make me, a small farmer in rural Malawi, more food secure, less poor? How am I going to get my product to market? And is there a trader that is taking advantage of me? So it just seems to me to look at cost benefit of fertilizer subsidies requires really taking a larger scope.
Thank you. 3 more 1-minute questions. And that's it. Sir, you are first.
Felix Bacadano, USDA. Sort of to respond to your own challenge, I had a question in mind. To me, the smart subsidy that exists, or if you want to put a smart subsidy, is called productivity. And the reason I say that is we're too fixated on the nominal price of fertilizer and not the price of fertilizer per unit of output. And I'll give you a clear example. West African cotton farmers. Putting aside all the trade discussion and distortions, over the last 10 years or so, their fertilizer prices have been going up, and it's not subsidized. Yields have been going down. When you talk to farmers, one of the reasons that they're exiting the sector is that they tell you is that yields can't keep up with the increase in production cost. A lot of them will tell you, even with the price we receive today, if my yields continue to go up, I'd still produce cotton profitably. And they complain about, I think the only person that touched the subject with Derek, they complain about the lack of support from national research programs. They talk to you about how 15 years ago, every year they got better new seeds. They talk about 15 years ago they had an extension agent, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's a clear example of a sector that without subsidies, that if we don't get the other issues corrected, even if we get farmers addicted, production will still go down. So fertilizer is not a magic bullet.
Thank you.
Quickly, to Dr. Baum, how do you propose to move the supply curve? Specifically, what policies do you imagine moving the supply curve of fertilizer to lower the price without distorting markets?
Okay, thank you. Last but one. Sir.
Hi, I'm Sergio Ardila. I work for the Inter-American Development Bank. You mentioned a lot about the subject of exit strategy, but didn't discuss it much. So I'd like to have your opinions on what sort of exit strategies are more credible and effective. In fact, they conclude, they make programs conclude or finish.
Thank you. And last, not least.
Hi, my name is Christopher Stampar. I'm a high schooler interning at the Millennium Institute. And my question is, how can or is it possible for these subsidies to realistically increase production capacity and the supply and productivity of small rural farmers to the point where they can viably compete in an international market when developed countries are providing billions of dollars of subsidies to their own farmers on a daily basis? So how can or is it possible for those subsidies to bring them realistically into those markets? Thank you.
Okay.
The exit strategy issue, what are we doing, what have we experienced in our programs? I just quickly looked into, what's the design of the Tanzanian program. There, the exit strategy is to just announce from the beginning, you get this for 3 years, you don't get it for more than that. So it's a kind of rolling participation. Some people will get 3 years, then it goes on to others. The alternative that was considered was to do it on a sliding scale. You get a certain level of subsidy in year 1, and then over time you take it down. The determination was that for implementation, that's too challenging to make it work. Now there's another one that the question is, what comes next then? Are people in a position to purchase their inputs after they've had 3 years of subsidy? And the answer to that is that if it's paired with adequate information for producers, if there are extension services, if these issues of productivity are addressed, which they should be in a properly designed smart subsidy program, then what's happening is that producers are getting an assisted introduction to a new technology system that they haven't been using in the past, because it's a combination of seed and fertilizer and advisory services, and that they understand how to use that. It's a more profitable one than they were using in the past, and that after 3 years of that, they know what it's all about. They should be able to sustain it if it is fundamentally profitable. Now, there's another way that we have used that basic design, again in Tanzania, and that's not with the voucher program, but to use a matching grant program implemented through the banks. And there, farmers chose their technologies that they wanted to work with. It was, again, a 50% subsidy, a subsidy for the array of inputs needed to adopt that technology. So it could be, it could be conservation tillage if they wanted to, in which case you need a different set of tools. So figure out what it is you want to do, how much it costs, what the cost of that's going to be, and then make sure that as a group you have opened a bank account. As soon as you open your bank account, then if you're a participant in this program, then 50% of the cost of that technology system goes into your bank account. Well, you have to put your 50% in. As soon as your 50% hits, then the program puts in the other 50%. You can then take the money and buy your inputs and go do what you do. Again, that lasts for 2 years. Initially, we had thought it should be 3, but the Tanzanians decided to do it for 2. So that's something that requires a linkage with the financial system. And there, the expectation is that by the time you exit something like that, 2 years may be too little, but the expectation is that the bank will know you will know at least where the bank is, and if you have a chance of continuing as a borrowing customer, then at least you've made that relationship. So there are a number of approaches. They're just very practical. What does it take? And just try to put one foot in front of the other to design it and build it into the programs.
Thank you.
Lots of other interesting things, but I can't go into them.
Thank you very much. Balu? And maybe our speakers can stay behind, answer individual questions in a moment.
Thank you very much. I think there are several issues, but let me make 2 quick clarification. When I talk of the shifting the supply curve to the right, the implicit idea is that there are a lot of distortions in the input markets in every country, almost every country. We have looked at 10 countries, Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia. And so that idea of shifting the supply curve came from reducing the transaction cost, and we identified 5 of those areas. So it was not a choice. Now, if the country has a very limited resources, then my priority is that first make the market work better before you subsidize. Otherwise, you are going to subsidize inefficiencies. So that is one clarification I wanted to make it. There was a question about, and second clarification is that the voucher program we did in Malawi, the government of Malawi did not follow that. The one we did was a triple win situation. It was tied to building a rural road. The farmers were supposed to work 20 days on the rural road, get a bag of urea and 10 kg of maize seed. This was for 100,000 farmers. And the net result was that the people who participated in that program, they reduced their hunger period from 4 months to 1 month. So there was a net benefit. We did propose a program for about 250,000 in next 2 years and 500 in the following years, but the government changed and everything was different. So I thought I'd clarify that one. Now, the fertilizer production, there was a question. One thing is that we always think Africa is a country. It's not a country. When food security comes, India, China, and Africa, these are the 3 countries which require a lot of attention. I want to make sure that, no, I think we look, as soon as we start looking at country by country, then we will make a better progress. Africa is a net exporter of fertilizers. This is the one thing everybody should know. It exports about 2 to 3 million tons of nutrients, N and P, but most of it is produced in North Africa, which is in Morocco, is the producer of the phosphate fertilizers in the world. It's a world leader. Then you got Algeria producing nitrogen fertilizers, Egypt producing, and Tunisia producing phosphate. So the question is that most of the production is in North Africa, a small amount in South Africa, which is self-sufficient, but in between we don't have any production facilities. There were a lot of plants built but never operated. We had a plant in Nigeria which was closed for 5 years. There is a plant which is sitting in Zambia for the last 10 years not operating. So I think the production is not the issue because fertilizer production is highly capital intensive. To build a reasonable sized plant, you need $1 billion investment. And so I think none of the market in sub-Saharan Africa, even Africa as a whole, which uses less than what Bangladesh uses in total fertilizer consumption, would not justify building such a large-scale plant. Second, sub-Saharan Africa is a small player in the global market. It's not a price maker. India and China and Brazil are price makers in the market. Sub-Saharan African countries, total, all 45 countries use less than 1% of the global fertilizer consumption. So if any country goes to the market and want to buy as much as they want, they're not going to distort the market supply. Having said that, now given that the last year the prices increased very high and came down, there may be possibility of building some plants where the natural gas is available, phosphate rock is available. I think the three countries we are looking at is Angola, Mozambique, and Tanzania, where you have natural gas and also phosphate rock, which you need. If a country doesn't have any of the raw materials, even don't think of that. I can bet my salary, which is not much, but you will lose money.
Okay,
so
thank
I think
you.
it's not the supply is not the issue. Issue is to how to increase the demand, how to improve the marketing efficiency. I think these are probably two. There are several others. Exit strategy she has covered, but I think again priority I listed in the end is that if you have limited resources, improve the efficiency of the market. If you have some more resources, then have a targeted water system, the type we did in Malawi. And
Thank you.
So and the soil acidity, I think somebody mentioned about the carbon. The carbon content is very low, so you can make some investment there. But I think we have to tailor all these programs to each country's requirements. Because even southern Zambia is different than from northern Zambia. You can give all the fertilizer in Kasama area, it's not going to do any good. So I think we should keep that perspective in mind.
Mm-hmm. Derek and Nick, do you have final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the agronomic data shows that in most of sub-Saharan Africa you get just as good a response to fertilizer as you do in other regions. So it's not a response problem. You do have an increasing number of these areas with soil degradation is so severe that there is a problem. So it's not the response problem, it's a price problem and an availability problem. And generally, as a rule of thumb, when you get away from the inland coast to the coastal areas, in inland areas, fertilizer costs about double what it does in other regions of the world. So if you look at rain-fed areas, similar agroecology in Asia and Latin America, they're using quite significantly much higher levels of fertilizer than you are in equivalent rain-fed areas of Africa. So I think, and then the second thing I wanted to say is in this question of subsidizing fertilizer or not, it's really about investing in agriculture. That's what we're talking about. And I think everybody agrees on that. And the question is, what's the best way of spending that money? And certainly some of it may be in fertilizer subsidies, but it's not, you put all your money in fertilizer subsidy, then you're ignoring your roads and your markets and your research and your extension and everything else that you need to have a really viable agricultural sector.
Nick?
Just a few comments. The gentleman from Ethiopia was asking about fiscal sustainability. There's very strong political support for subsidies. So in some countries, Malawi, for example, or Tanzania earlier, they're willing to come up with the funds to subsidize fertilizer even without outside support. But there has also been outside support. DFID came in to support the Malawi program, and the World Bank is supporting several. But I think it's really not a question of fiscal sustainability. The really important issue is it a good use of funds? Because even if it's sustainable, it was not necessarily a good idea. So you want to compare it to what if you had invested this $100 million in agricultural research or in better roads or in extension and training. And this gets back to one of the comments that the Kocho mentioned, that capacity development and addressing the market failures of information and credit are very important strategies and ones that work with the market and help to develop the demand. But I think it's important to realize that even with the best program, even with a good information system and a credit system and so on, because of the geography of the country and the cost of transportation, there are some areas where fertilizer is simply not going to be profitable. And so we can't take it as the criteria of success that everybody is using fertilizer. Our goal should be promoting efficient use of fertilizer to the point where they're reaching their sort of economic optimum. And one other comment about the Asian experience. We haven't talked about that. A number of Asian countries did use fertilizer. I think the main question is, was that a big contributing factor to their success? And Schengen has done some research looking at cross-state patterns in China and India, and looking at the effect of differences in different types of public investment on agricultural growth and poverty reduction. And generally, fertilizer subsidy was one of the least productive ways of either boosting output or reducing poverty. The really high payoff ones are agriculture research, roads, and education. Correct me if I've got the order wrong, but that's my one-sentence summary of some interesting research that Schengen did. Okay.
He seems to be nodding. Yeah. Well, colleagues, you came to find out if smart subsidies are smart, and you got a very complex answer. And I think that's good. The simplistic answers to ill-designed subsidies given in the 1980s must not, and I don't think will be, repeated to the process in which we are currently in. I think the good news is that a complex problem, soil fertility management, improving the nutrient utilization in agriculture so that we have sustainable and more productive agriculture, is currently being addressed with a host of experimental designs and alternative institutional arrangements and through markets and state and public and private. And as long as we follow those carefully, document them carefully, show what works under what circumstances, there is hope for progress. So I think smart subsidies will get smarter, and in the end may deserve the title of smart subsidies, and we will live out of them and don't need to have them for the long run. Applause for our speakers, please.